Welcome back, everyone. Week 4 is going to introduce you to scholarship in writing assessment that focuses on how we make assessment in evaluating students' texts more equitable for diverse learners. Monday's readings is going to ask you to think about race and ethnicity, and you're going to read a book chapter by Arnitha Ball in Assessing Writing, a critical source book. You're also going to read another piece by Asao Inoue. You're also going to watch, or you can read the transcript of, his 2019 remarks to the Conference on College Composition and Communication, the 4 Cs. The 4 Cs is kind of the marquee conference for our discipline. It's where a lot of folks, before they send things out to publication, they will test out some ideas at the Conference on College Composition and Communication. It's a very big conference. Folks from all over the country, actually all over the world, show up to deliver their papers at the 4 Cs. So you're going to read, you can either read or you can watch the video of Asao Inoue's 2019 remarks to the Conference on College Composition and Communication. The conference was in Pittsburgh that year, and I remember people, it's like a really large ballroom, and I remember people in the ballroom were kind of squirming in their seats a little bit when Inoue addressed the scholars of color in the audience. And in that kind of side conversation, like, hey, I just want to talk to the scholars of color, he says, what about these white colleagues that are not very supportive, that try to pretend that race doesn't exist, and doing that in an audience where it's almost overwhelmingly white folks. That really kind of turned the tables, if you will, on race in our discipline. And it was I think it was an important moment in our discipline to have that, particularly somebody that was talking about assessment. Historically, when composition scholars and writing assessment scholars have talked about, written about, thought about students, they've kind of assumed a traditional, monolithic, one-size-fits-all understanding of who our students are, typically white, male, and middle or upper middle class. That reality has changed quite significantly over the last few decades. Women make an increasingly larger share of college classrooms, and our college classrooms, just like our society as a whole, has become quite diverse in terms of race and ethnicity. What the readings for Monday asks is something like this. Are the methods we use to assess student writing sensitive to this changing landscape? I think Inoue is also answering a slightly different question. He's kind of answering, are the standards that we use to assess, are they impacted by racial and cultural biases? Which I think he would say yes. And he would also say we need to do something about that. And that's where labor-based grade contracts and other things that he proposed comes into play. Ball and Inoue's work, including the work of several other scholars in writing assessment, argue that the standards that we use to evaluate student writing are impacted by racial biases that we bring to the table, oftentimes unconsciously. For Monday, you'll also read a prepared presentation I gave to the Conference on College Composition and Communication, the 4 Cs, back in 2017. In that presentation, you'll see that I was trying to work through how we might do anti-racist assessment work at institutions that are overwhelmingly white. So Shawnee State University is, depending upon the year, between 85 and 90% white. So not a lot of diversity. Our area counties, actually, they're even less diverse than our campus is. So I was trying to figure out how we might develop assessment policies and practices that can combat racism at a school where there's very little diversity. And having reflected on that presentation and read it through a few times since I decided to include it with this class, I kind of hope that you come away from it realizing or thinking about the fact that the only time that you talk about racism, it shouldn't just be when there's diversity around you. Like if you decide I'm teaching a room full of white folks, therefore I don't have to talk about race, I think that we're missing the boat as a discipline. Because I think that those are actually the places to have conversations about race, and to do so in a respectful way that is actually productive, that helps break down barriers that I think in defensiveness and kind of weird guilt things that come up or assumed guilt that comes up when people talk about race, and they kind of just shut things down and they retreat back to their corners. I don't think that that's super helpful, and I think that that's what I was trying to get at with that presentation back in 2017. The reading load in week 4 is going to be a little bit lighter as you all are putting on your finishing touches for the first major project in the class. The readings for Thursday of week 4 are going to focus on gender and neurodiversity. Discussions about gender in the discipline, particularly in writing studies, and to a lesser extent writing assessment scholarship, it's been around for a while. Folks have talked about the different ways that folks communicate and how gender often plays a role in that communication, and it's kind of an important development in the discipline. Less so in writing assessment, but it's something that some folks have talked about, and the Haswell and Haswell article that you're going to read for Thursday gets into that quite a bit. Thursday is also a conversation about neurodiversity and the role that might play in writing assessment in grade contracts. So newer areas of scholarship in writing assessment, and I'm excited to hear what you all have to say about them. On Thursday, if you're available, 6:30 p.m., there'll be a Zoom meeting for the class. If you'd like to stop by and talk about the readings, if you do that, participate in the conversation, you won't have to complete the discussion board post. If you're not able to join us, that's totally fine, and I'll post the conversation in case there's something in there that might be helpful for you. But Thursday of week 4 at 6:30 p.m., I'll send out a Zoom link and also send out some questions for you all to consider prior to that meeting. Beginning in week 5, so starting to look forward to the following weeks, our conversations are going to get much more practical and hands-on. And practical and hands-on doesn't necessarily mean it's better than theoretical and abstract. The readings over the last 4 weeks, I think you need them in order to make good decisions for your final project. So the final 2.5 weeks of the class are going to be about how to put together a prompt, how to put together a unit, how to develop learning outcomes that you can actually assess, how to come up with formative and summative assessments that can help you figure out whether or not students are learning. But as you're putting your own final project together, you're going to need those readings in the first 4 weeks to justify the decisions that you make in that reflection that you will need to write. That reflection is quite important. I'm definitely interested, and I'm really excited about the prompts that you guys might put together, the kind of creative assignments or trainings that you might be able to put together for the final project. But when I'm thinking about like the grade in the class and the grade on that final project, it's the project itself and it's also the reflection. Like that reflection is very important. So you need to be able to think about the last 4 weeks and what you've read and be able to apply that to the decision-making process that you describe in your reflection. That's it for week 4. Looking forward to our conversation on Thursday, and looking forward to see what you all think about these readings that we're going to tackle this week. That's it for now.